Welcome to Patrick's Scale Studio. My name is Patrick and I'll be your host. So right now we are on build video 18. 17 we finished up the aft or funnel structure on the USS Curtis Wilbur, and our next step is going to be putting in a little bit of character into the paint work. What do I mean by character? So if we have a look here, this looks just to say, it looks boring. It looks very boring. Gray, white, red, all very stark, very contrasting. It just looks boring. There are so many intricate little details on this ship that I would love to be able to bring out and make it easy for the eye to catch those details and kind of focus in to pick up even more subtle details. But in addition, this is just flat gray. Most naval ships are gray, and it's kind of a boring color. I'm sorry to all the navies in the world, but gray is just not a very eye-catching, creative, or imaginative color. And better yet, they don't look like that anymore after they've actually been in use. So we tend to weather them. We tend to put in some fine line washes, or just some real thin washes to help some of that detail pop out, which might otherwise blend in with its gray background. So what do I mean by that? Well, I've already gone ahead and done a little bit of work on the washes. I don't know if this is going to come into focus, but you can kind of see here these pieces here that go down to the chain lockers. You kind of see a little bit of a black wash on there. It kind of helps some of that detail pop around there. Otherwise, they just kind of look like gray tubes. Similarly, this part right here, I'm not sure what it is, but again, now we can see that there are concentric rings here on this part. And should we use only a black wash? No, by all means no. So if we take a look here at the vertical launch systems, I took a bit of ghost gray color. Let me locate that really quickly. Sorry for that, but there it is right there. And when I thinned this down and applied it into details here, like these vertical launch tubes or some of these parts back here, it helped some of that detail pop out. It made this look rather less like just one big flat piece and more like individual little doors for each missile launch tube. There's the label. I'm not even going to begin to pretend like I know how to pronounce that, but they make fantastic oils. And so I take some of this, and I will take some odorless mineral spirits, make an incredibly thin wash, just barely touch it onto a corner and watch where it uses capillary action to fill in all the little crevices. And then afterwards, we can go back and clean up any spots where we don't want it. So sometimes you'll get some on top of the little hatches. I can take either a Q-tip moistened with some mineral spirits and wipe it away there, or I can just use my brush and move the color off of there and then back into one of the little crevices. So we did that just about all over I could find anywhere to apply that wash to. And you can see it started to bring out some of these hatches, which otherwise just kind of blended in. A little recess back here with a pipe in it that came out and looks a lot nicer. Right here, the life raft canisters. These large grates or vents, they even got treatment of both that ghost gray and the Starship Filth, I think it is called. Same company. So yeah, the whole ship got a treatment with a line wash, including even these little pieces right here. Now it looks kind of like a very heavy stark contrast here, and that's just because it's under the lights with the camera focused in. But at the distance, they're not standing out so much, especially under not such harsh light conditions. Additionally, something else I've already started here, and I'm going to show a little bit of how I do more of, is, as you can see here along the deck and here, I've started to apply some real subtle, very, very subtle oil shades there, just to kind of make it look like this deck has been walked on and actually used by the sailors. Back here, we even put a little bit more in here for where there will be an SH-60 sitting. So it's obviously going to be dirty. Aircraft are pretty dirty vehicles when they're being used in any kind of a regular way. So they're, you know, dripping oil, they're dripping fuel, there's dirt from them. Especially a rotor wash will kick up all kinds of dust and dirt and debris and stuff like that. So we put a little bit down here, and it's a little bit heavier here, but that's not even going to be such a big issue because with the helo sitting on top of it, it shouldn't stand out too much. But again, I wanted the decks to look like there's been sailors walking around on this. I didn't want it to look like it was just fresh out of the shipyard. And so with that, we'll get into doing some more of the application here on the deck while I've got you, so I can show you how I'm doing that. And while we're on this subject here, I just want to explain, for ships, I feel like it's a very fine line that we have to toe. You see a lot of ships that are over-weathered. There are so many extensive rust stains and so many dirt patches and grime and everything like that. And realistically, it helps to remember that these are billion-dollar vessels. You know, billions of dollars goes into building each one of these in real life. So the Navy's not going to let it just rust away out from underneath the sailors. Also, too much rust and dirt and grime really is discrediting the military, discrediting the government-employed civilians, and discrediting the civilian contractors that all either sail on this or maintain it in certain ways. That said, there will be some weathering and there will be some rust. It's unavoidable if you're in salt water. So like an anchor, there's going to be some slight rust where that anchor chain comes up. And not having a little bit of weathering, a little bit of dirt, a little bit of grime, a little bit of rust, is in the opposite way discrediting the Navy, in that they would never use this thing if that's the way it always looked. So, like I said, that fine line there where we're trying to make it look used but well maintained. So that is my aim here. And additionally, further comments on realism of how this is depicted is fine, as everyone's got opinions. I know what my grandfather used to say about opinions. You're like something else because everyone's got one. But you have to keep in mind that this is a scale replica. This is, under 2.5 foot long replica of a giant ship. So while these things might not seem realistic with some of the doorways outlined in black, or some of the dirt and stuff that we've got down here, while it might not seem really truly realistic, it's my interpretation, and it's how I wish to draw the eye to certain details, or kind of drink in everything that goes into what the ship looks like in my mind. So with that, I hope you'll stay with me and continue on watching here. I'll be back in just a second. Okay, so what do we need to do this? First of all, you need the proper oil paints. So in order to put down what I'm putting down on the decks right now, I'm using a Dead Flesh sand brown, and then a little bit of smoke. There's other colors you're going to see on my palette, and that's for other applications here I'll be putting on the ship. But this is my palette. When I put down the oils, as you can see, there's large wet spots around each of the oils. That's the linseed oil. I think it's linseed oil that is bleeding out of these, because I don't want these really wet. I want them pretty dry. Because what I'm going to end up doing is taking a decent brush. It's not an amazing brush, but it's not a bad brush. But its bristles are very, very soft, and it responds very well to very slight tapping and twirling motions and blending. And I also had another brush. This is definitely not a great brush because the bristles keep falling out on it, but this has been good for if I need to apply some mineral spirits anywhere on the deck, or if I need to kind of wet down this little piece of paper towel to where I can barely moisten this just to get enough on there to help keep moving the color around. So that is the name of the game on this, is to put down just the barest amount of color, get it spread out enough, and then move it around to where it gets to where you're happy. As you can see right here, everything's super feathered. I'm very happy with how that looks. It went right over top of this red warning decal right there, and really helped kind of make that one with the deck. Very happy with how that did. And you know, likewise over the large white stencil that goes in the back over the helicopter landing area right there, kind of help bring that and make that one with the deck versus it just standing out so proudly. So I've got the oil colors. There's the dead flesh, there's the sand brown, and there's the smoke. Then I've got some odorless mineral spirits. It doesn't have to be brand new or clean or anything like that. As you can see, this has been through some use, but that's okay. We don't need a lot of it anyway. The first thing I'm going to do is just barely wet this brush, and just tapping the bristles and only the bristles into it, it wicks up into the brush. You can see how much it picked up right off the bat. And this cardboard piece is fantastic for sapping most of the moisture out of this brush. And then we can go on to, it's right here, you can already see there's some residual paint in there. One thing I really like about these oil paints is you can work with them for such a long amount of time after laying them down. To be perfectly transparent with you, this is my first time using them in such a wide application here. Typically, I've only done it with panel line washes and things like that. So this was kind of a step, and it also kind of fits in with my goals here of trying something new. With each build I do, I like to try something new. So hit this, I'm going to go ahead and just tap into the barest amount of this dead flesh color. You can see I'm just barely anything's coming off the brush, but that's still too much. I'm going to take this and rub it across this paper towel a little bit, and we'll go up here. Now this is a, for me, the way I prefer doing this is it's a more of a cumulative effect, in that at first you're not going to see much here. You just kind of see maybe the slightest hints. And if you're not putting down enough, or you're not seeing enough color go down, you can always go back and tap again. But the important thing to remember is you want to build this up slowly. So for instance, if I go in, and this is also another neat thing to show you if you haven't used these before, if I go in and I get too much, it's still not even too much. I'm going to start to get too much though, where it's not looking like the deck of a ship, but starting to look more like freshly fallen snow. I always come back here with a Q-tip Slightly moisten that Q-tip. And now most of that's gone. Even put some of it back a little bit here. But now most of that's gone. That is another wonderful piece of working with this medium. And now what I've got left, I can kind of go back and just start blending it out. So one important thing to remember is you might not get the ship done in one setting or one day. If you get it to where you want it, that's great, and if you can do it in one day, that's great too. But because we're building up in small amounts, little bit by little bit, you might not get it all done in one day. It might take several days. So, doesn't look like much, but kind of starting to look like beginnings of just a little bit of dust, maybe a little bit of salt. It's coming out of the ocean air. There we go. Now it kind of started to desaturate a little bit of that XF53 that we were using for our deck color, the non-skid. Pretty happy with that, actually. So again, no huge visible difference right now unless we turn it, and now it becomes a little bit more apparent. But with turning it, I actually noticed that I could use a little bit more blending and feathering. So another important thing I've learned about doing this is that a flat coat will really help turn this into a part of the ship. It will really help blend it in even better. Because as you saw when I turn this to the side, you can see how much that color stands out, and a lot of that is just due to the sheen of the semi-gloss that I coated this entire thing with. These oil paints dry dead flat. When everything's nice and flat, this won't stand out so much from dead on or even from the angle. And then you can even just use long broad strokes like this after it's all applied to kind of help feather it out even better. Alright, so now that that's down, on this side I'm going to put down just a touch of this smoke color here. This is very strong and very easy to overdo it. So I always go to where I've already rubbed off quite a bit of color and take my brush and kind of grind it into there. And now the bottoms of the bristles are dark. You just barely make out any paint on there. And another thing to remember on this is we haven't put all the detail into there. There's a lot more to go into there, railings and everything right here. So I try to keep this isolated to the great big, just flat, dead looking areas. But more detail is going to go into this. Stairs, railings, I said stairs, ladders, railings, we still have the flag lockers, you know, the bridge structure, everything like that. Still has to go on this. So there's a lot more detail. So this is going to go into more of a background mode afterwards. But again, it's also going to help give us that sense of the ship is in use versus just fresh from the shipyard. So I'm happy with where that's at. I'm not too worried about doing up here. There's just not a lot of large, bland, boring areas right here. Now, if we go up to the deck, though, there's a lot here to do. Also, when I was talking about rust stains, there are a couple things I found that were practically on every picture I saw of an Arleigh Burke class destroyer. One, right here, I believe it's a capstan. The chains come up and they wrap around. The anchor chains are rusty. There's just nothing the Navy can really do about that. They're in the water. They're going to be exposed to the salt water. They get rusty. So unless you're just showing a very freshly painted ship, freshly painted anchor chains, there's going to be rust here. Same thing with the anchors. But because there is a downward slope on this forward part of the deck, there's going to be a little bit of rust coming off of here onto the deck right here. It's not a rusty deck. It's just discoloration from the wreck coming off, discoloration of the deck coming off of the anchor chains themselves, and it just comes down as the water runs off. So I saw that. I also saw some very slight rust staining from this deck right here down here, and then very, very, very slight little bits of rust streaks coming out of some of these holes on the side of the ship. But other than that, I'm going to try to keep it pretty rust free and pretty clean. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and do most of this off camera. We'll do I'll put in that first rust discoloration there on the deck, and then I'll touch base with you again here, and we'll see where we're at. Okay, so my deck, foredeck is all dirtied up as much as I'd like it. I might have just a little bit more I might put up here and here, but I also got some tiny rust staining here from the anchor chains right there, and that's just as easy as really thinning down some orange paint. You just barely need any on there, and specifically for this one we used faded dark yellow. Now this is not the end of this journey here as far as the little bit of the rust staining goes, but for right now it's what I want to do with the oil. And it's very easy. You just find where you want it and pull straight back, and you get some of these nice little streaks right here. It's okay to put it around the base here of your capstan. Anytime you have clanking metal, you're going to have a little bit of chipping and stuff like that as well, so you might even get a little bit of rust up on the capstan, but it's not really going to happen so much on top of this stuff, because mainly all this is discoloration from the rust from these anchor chains, and the anchor chains aren't hitting the tops of all of these. Might be a little bit of water splashing here and there, and then you get a little bit of metal on metal contact here at the beginning of these tubes, and you get a little bit right here. Even putting some down in there is okay. But for the most part, we're not trying to depict a rusty ship. We're trying to show where the anchor chains have been raised and lowered, and rusty water is coming off of them and staining here. And it looks pretty, I mean, it actually looks worse in my eyes than the pictures I've seen of Curtis Wilbur. It looks worse than what this is. But again, I don't think it would be doing very nice credit to the actual sailors and crew of the USS Curtis Wilbur to depict anything overly rusty, because from everything I've seen, this ship always looked pretty damn spectacular. But this kind of stuff, this kind of business is unavoidable if the ship has been used at all. The last place I've seen it would be right here. It's coming off of this little platform right here. There's just a trickle of rust right down here, and it looks like it's just where water's catching. Salt water, spray, ocean, catching there and just drying up and running down, and we're getting a little bit of discoloration right on here. It's not a rust streak right here, it's just a discoloration from up here. And then lastly, and I haven't put these on yet because I'm not doing the side of the ship yet, there's going to be some light streaks right down here. Again, unavoidable. Water, salt water, sea, all that kind of stuff is running through it. It happens. But other than that, for the most part, it's not going to be a rusty ship. Not at all. Not on my watch. So that's that for right now. Next, we're going to move on to getting some color modulation through, it's called the oil dot technique, where you just get several different colors, you dot them on there, and then you get some mineral spirits on your brush, and you kind of streak it up and down a little bit here, and it helps add a little bit of depth and a little bit of coloration to that. I don't think it needs it very heavily, but we'll try it out anyway just to see where it goes. But one thing that definitely is present is salt streaks. You're going to get salt streaks here and there. Also, as long as this thing is in water, you're going to have a little bit of algae growth. I usually like to see this here while the salt streaks are going up from the water line. The algae's kind of going down a little bit, and just kind of like a real dull brown. It's hardly going to be noticeable. And then there might be just a touch of a little bit of fresher stuff, but that would be so bare minimum here that it almost might be not noticeable. But we'll go ahead and give it a shot and see where we go with that. So be right back. Okay, so oil dot filter, I guess, is again what this is called. So I've already tested this out on just this little section here. You can just barely see a difference between here and here. And that's what we're after. It also kind of helps give this a dead flat sheen though. But again, this should be so subtle that you really have to look at it in order to see that anything different was done here than here. Another thing, I'm going to try to avoid this upper surface. In fact, I can see where some of my sloppiness got on here. So again, because the oils are so wonderfully forgiving, it just takes a little bit of mineral spirits. And that's gone. But I'm going to try to avoid the upper area. I'll leave this upper area right here, and for the most part, without this oil dot filter. I think it seems a little bit more logical. We're going to have some more slight variations in color down here where we're being affected by the ocean. So, of course, the way I went about did this, I got a much smaller brush there, and I went into my color palette here, and I grabbed just the barest. I just touched in there. I got the barest amount of blue, and I go a little bit more sparing on the dark blue, and just we're barely touching here. Randomness is good. Alright, so that darker blue on there, and for those wondering, that darker blue is Gundam blue. I'm not a Gundam builder, but it came in the set. It was a science fiction fantasy set, and it's got some nice colors to it. So next we'll go into this right here, and this right here is called Turquoise Lights. Got quite a bit on there, so I'm going to go ahead and you notice most of these that I'm putting on here complement this gray very well. Now this is by no means what anyone else has to do. This is just what I'm doing. I'm trying out new methods, new techniques, see how they work for me, see if I like them. And so far, I'm really enjoying working with the oils like this. So next I'm going to get a touch of this dark green. Very sparing on this. It's a very strong color. And I'm going to go a little bit more here at the bottom. Again, ocean water carries with it a certain amount of algae. So it stands to reason that we might have greener tones toward the bottom. And if it's not real, well, it works for me because I kind of like the effect so far. So, soaking up some mineral spirits in here. I'm getting rid of most of this. But I don't want the brush as dry as when I was going on the deck. And we take this and just start dragging it down. Whew, it is a mess. And at first, you're thinking, oh hell, what did I just do? That is a giant Smurf ship. I was old enough to remember the Smurfs. But wipe off that excess and then just start going back over it. There's no real prescribed perfect order to do this in. And sometimes you'll even see some residual spots of where you initially dabbed. And that's okay. You can get pretty rough with this. The acrylic paints beneath it should not give way to your paints, your oil paints, or your mineral spirits. Alright, I'm going to get a little bit more mineral spirits. I'm going to clean my brush. Get rid of most of this. It's kind of damp here. And I don't like it right there on the waterline marker, so I'm going to go ahead and try starting to brush up a little bit, but I'm not going to go too far up. I don't want to, again, get that upper area. Again, just trying to concentrate on removing the majority of this paint. All we want is the barest, faintest hint that there is ever another color other than gray on there. So, another dip in the mineral spirits. Most of that's coming off. Excellent. And go back over again. And again, this is not a process that you're probably going to be able to accomplish in one session. That's all right. I'm scrubbing that down. Another thing you've noticed is, probably noticed, as I'm using a lot of brush strokes perpendicular to the water line. So as water is coming up on the hull, it's running down. Up on the hull, it's running down. It's the only part of the hull that's seeing water movement like this is underneath this water line. Very, very, almost not wet at all brush. Just kind of scrubbing most of this out of there. A lot of products that are used for this. Some people use the oil brusher, almost look like mascara pens. A lot of people use this. Winsor Newton paints are also a very common oil paint for this. One of the things I've definitely found useful in my application with them is letting them bleed most of that oil off. I once upon a time started watching the YouTube videos put on by Uncle Night Shift, and he uses the oil paints pretty extensively, and this was a while back. And that's what he started doing, and of course curiosity got the best of me on some other projects in the past, and I tried starting off without bleeding all that oil off, and it just was too runny, and I didn't get the good, absolutely flat coat that I desired, that I was watching him get on a very consistent basis. So I was to show you, I wondered why he was doing that, and I promptly answered myself. Alright, so we got all that pushed off of there. Now it still looks greener than the rest. Why is that? Because the mineral spirits is still drying on there. And wait for that to finish drying, and it'll start to flatten up, the sheen will start to disappear, and it'll start to blend in more with its neighboring section that we already did before. But it'll barely stand out from this section back here. Alright, so now I'm just concerned about getting this garbage off of here. So go ahead and get that off. And down here, we can even use a paper towel to blot that away as well. Alright, so looking back now and looking at how we've done, and it looks pretty close to there. It looks pretty good. So got to do the rest of the hull, and we'll get back on next steps here on the hull weathering. Alright, so instead of moving on to doing the rest of this, so I can try to get something out for everybody today, I'm going to go ahead and move on with finishing these two sections as I want them to do while I've got the oils out for it. So I want to do a couple things here. One, I want to put some salt streaking coming up from the water. And then two, I want to create a little bit, just a touch of algae down there. So my brush damp with some mineral spirits. I'll go ahead and I'm going to touch in a little bit of this with just a little bit of this green right here. I want a very dull color. And if you grew up watching Bob Ross, I'm sorry I did two, and if I come off sounding anything like him, one, I'm very proud of myself, and two, if it doesn't make you happy, I'm sorry. We're going to go ahead and just tap some of this in there. And go back and pick up a little bit more. Again, like, oh no, what is he doing now? It looks like garbage. It was so clean before. So the neat thing is the dark green in that mixture kind of starts to show up nicely against that water line. You can kind of tell there's a little bit of a color difference there. As we go down though, I'm going to wipe off this color. I'm going to start feathering this down here. But as you can see, these oil paints are so forgiving. Just push the color around as much as you want as we go. Wipe off color from our brush. And again, we don't need anything fancy here for this. I'm just going to up there a little bit more. just trying to blend and feather this. You don't want very much of this showing up at all. Just very slight discoloration. It's okay if it dries up on you. The brush is still just very slightly damp. Alright, trying to soften this up a bit. Get some of that color off the brush. Go back in and start trying to feather this out. As far as the feathering right now, I'm only kind of concerned about down here. And everything here is going to be receiving a nice flat coat. And under the water line, remember the water goes like this. Some areas it's okay to leave it a little bit heavier than others. So I'm actually fairly pleased with how that's looking right now. So I'm going to get a lot of thinner and just the barest, just the absolute barest amount of this green. And this dark green is called faded green. I believe it's part of their armor weathering effects. Kind of touch around here a little bit. You'll probably just barely make out anything there. It shows up a little bit different for me. But it gives a little bit more of a green sheen to there. It kind of reactivates some of the paint underneath it because there's so much thinner there. For this to dry a little bit. Very slight. Very slight. I'll do this again here with this lighter green. Lots of thinner. And this time I'm going to try to obtain a dry brush. I don't want hardly anything on there because this green is pretty bright, and oops, I don't want that running down like that. I'm kind of like, and this would be indications of a little bit fresher algae. Actually already a little too bright right there. And here the lovely folks outside drag racing in the freeway. Which the police officers will do absolutely nothing to stop from going on a nightly basis. Okay, I'm going to let this drop a little bit, but it looks very bright, very garish right now. After this dries up a little bit, I can blend it back a little bit more. The mineral spirits, it doesn't take very long. And again, if you try this, at the end of the day, you don't like it, it's just so easy. Paper towel. Just barely wet it with a little mineral spirits and start wiping it off. If you painted with acrylics, the mineral spirits should not affect the acrylics. So, not as subtle as it was before, but we're definitely able to blend it back and knock it back a bit. So I'm going to completely wet my brush, and I'd like to get a fresh paper towel. Next one, I'm going to be doing the saltwater effects. I need something there too. Need something there without the color. Depending on how you want to do this, you can go with white or you can go with this pale flesh. I'm going to try a white. I'm just going to drag just the barest amount out. Now mind you, I'm no expert on this, and this is a first time for me, so you're seeing it here with me. It's my first time too. But as I understand it, we take this, maybe we need a little bit more paint. Now, of course, these are going to get lighter as you get closer to the top of the hole. I'm going to blend them out a little bit. Let's go very subtle. And see, there we go. Much as I haven't cared for some of the photo etch in this kit, some of it has been pretty resilient to my repeated attempts to completely break it off, so I will say that for the I Love Kit photo etch. It has stood up well to my abuse. Lovely shot of my arm there. So for me, more is, or less is more on this. For me, the effect looks better if it's kept very, very subtle. However, it is your ship, your project, and you should make it however you want. Whether or not you like this, you don't like this, you want more, it's not standing out enough. My goal here is for something so subtle that you kind of have to focus to take it in. It doesn't have to be a perfect line. But again, the goal for me is to make this a little bit more visually stimulating than gray. Alright, so it needs a little bit of cleanup down here, but for the most part I'm pretty happy with this. Heck, some folks might even think I put on too much. Okay. Pretty satisfied with that. It looks like it's been used. Doesn't look like it's been abused. It just looks like it's been traveling around in an ocean for a little bit. So with that, I'll go ahead and do one of the most minute little rust streak. And I'm not happy with that. So more than anything, all I did was make that look green. Oh, there's another drag racer. Hope they're getting all the attention they dreamed of. Okay, I'm much more happy with that now. The rust effect is lessened. Looks like there's just a little bit of touch of something there that indicates that water's been moving and corroding. But that's all we're going to do as far as rust, is something like that on some of these holes. Not all of them. But for the most part, I'm pretty happy where this section of the hull is at. Just a little bit of cleanup to do down here. So with that, I'm going to put this aside. Let's talk about my next steps here. Next steps, of course, is getting the rest of this hull weathered. And why am I doing it now versus after I get the entire thing put together? Well, when I first started doing it, it was very indicative to me that it was a good idea to do it now, because doing this with the brush invited all kinds of opportunities for disaster with small little pieces flying off. So I haven't lost them, but some pieces of railing have fallen off. An antenna or two have fallen off as well. So before I tack on any more antennas or more railings or rigging or the mast or anything else that is incredibly delicate, I want to get this done. After this, though, then we're going to work on the rigging. We're going to work on the bridge, get that in place, then we'll finish up with the deck. So I am foreseeing after this maybe a couple more videos and we'll be all set. So I really appreciate your time. I thank you very much for joining me. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, feedback, if you're a sailor and you're currently serving on one of these and you're telling me what I'm doing is absolutely ridiculous, all of that feedback, please leave for me in the comments below. All I aim to do is get better. And with that, I thank you very much for your time. Wish you a safe day and happy modeling. Take care.